Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Your pathway to your purpose is at Alliant International University.
Now enrolling for the School of Psychology Master's Program in Couples and Family Therapy. Elevate your career with hands-on instruction from working professionals and gain experience in treating and guiding individuals and families regardless of circumstance to navigate challenging times in healthy ways. Are you ready for a new challenge? Find out more about this online and co-amped accredited program at alliant.edu.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is William Ramsey. First, be sure to come check out the 4th annual Forbidden Gathering in Fort Collins, Colorado, September 12th through 14th. We will once again be having a 3-day celebration and gathering of free thinkers, truth, and high strangeness seekers. We'll be having celebrations, food, podcasts, a hike through the northern Colorado mountains. If you would like to attend, please RSVP to forbiddenknowledgenews at gmail.com with subject gathering for more details and to reserve your place at the event. It is completely free to attend. It will be a potluck event, so we request that each party attending bring food, drink, or other party supplies. We definitely hope to see as many of you as possible there. Again, if you'd like to RSVP, please email forbiddenknowledgenews at gmail.com with subject gathering. Check out my films. Doors of Perception is available now on Amazon Prime. Occult Louisiana is on Tubi, Roku channel, and multiple streaming platforms. Doors of Perception should be soon available on the free streamers as well. We are booking guests for September. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews at gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show William Ramsey. He is an attorney, author and researcher, and graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, with a degree in history. He has authored several books and produced documentaries. William, welcome back. How you doing?
Great. Great to be with you, Chris. Thanks for the invite.
It's great to have you back. Always a wonderful discussion. Today is another fascinating one. We're going to be getting into the mysterious book Catcher in the Rye and the connections and effects it seems to have surrounding assassinations, MK Ultra ties, which we were just discussing as well. There's a lot of darkness surrounding this book and the people that seem to have been deeply involved with reading it and also have connections with certain organizations. It goes very deep. Looking forward to sharing this with the audience today. Before we get too deep into this, just remind everybody a little bit about yourself. Let them know where they can find your work.
Yeah, my podcast is in the top 5.5% podcasts in the world. It's William Ramsey Investigates. I cover a lot of different topics. And then I've written 5 books and have 5 documentaries on my Patreon. But and I post a lot on X and Twitter. But yeah, this is really something else. This book ties into so many, really the primary well-known assassinations are 2 that happened 3 months apart, which is John Lennon. These are huge. And the attempted killing of Ronald Reagan. and the assassins are Chapman and Hinckley. And my research, and some people have seen this as well, but it shows that these guys had a fixation on this book, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, published in 1951. And the real question is why? Why were they so close to it, and how they identified with the lead character? So there was some kind of psychological morphing that took place in their characters where they almost over-identified with the main character, Catcher in the Rye, who is Holden Caulfield. And I think it's really a fascinating story, and these two assassinations were so important. John Lennon was such a public figure, and he was so young, like 1980 or 79. But it's just an incredible story, and it leads up even to today. There's strange synchronicities and overlaps between some of these strange killers that we know in the press, whether it's Mangione, Ruth, or the other guy, Crooks, these guys had weird connections, some to places in Hawaii, of all places. Ruth was very close where he lived in Oahu, of all places. And Mangione were all on Oahu for some reason. Chapman, Mangione, and Ruth are all from Oahu and then spread out and did these assassinations.
Interesting.
So a lot of strange things, yeah.
Right on. Well, I know you have some slides to get to. And anyone listening on the audio podcast, if you'd like to see the visuals that we'll be presenting today, please go over to Rumble. So, yeah, where should we start with this?
Well, I do have those slides, and I think that's a good start. Like, I do have notes on the book. This book was required reading for a time in all high schools. I was supposed to read it. Most people read it. They don't really know. They were young. I was young when I read it. 65 million copies of this book have been distributed worldwide. It's an incredible number. And the real question is, why is this book pushed? And why is this character brought out into the public consciousness, or really the kind of suggestive consciousness of young teenage boys and girls?
Yeah.
And once you read the book as kind of an adult, I'm in my 50s, you see this stuff. And I've done some decent amount of research into kind of MK Ultra mind control. I've had a lot of guests on that subject who know a lot more than me. A lot of these states are involved in this book. So dissociation, schizophrenia, repetitive statements, which you see in other kind of mind-controlled killers like Sirhan. This repeated thing is in there. And he talks about being a split brain. So why is this kid who's depicted as a 16-year-old rich kid from New York City, how does he have all this sophisticated psychological knowledge, and why is it in this? And there's this theme of transformation, and a lot of these, it's interesting because these people who go on to commit these assassinations, they're in a process of transformation. So like they'll say 6 months before he was totally normal, or Hinckley had a very normal childhood. He was athletic and popular and liked girls and stuff, and all of a sudden he becomes this very strange person. So you see this, and they see these repetitive phrases in this book. I would suggest people read it because it does have a lot of things. It has themes of masonry, so you see the occultism, and pedophilia. And I think it ties in kind of to the strange thing about Epstein too. But one of the things about Caulfield, he's obsessed with his 10-year-old sister Phoebe. And that's how the book really ends. And so if you see some of these titles, you'll see this carousel horse. That's how the book ends with Holden Caulfield in Central Park, of all places. And so why does this book end up in Central Park, where that's where John Lennon, the infamous Dakota building, is right off Central Park. Chapman's there. And then Mangione, when he kills this healthcare CEO, for some reason, the motives are somewhat sketchy, but then he flees into Central Park and leaves his backpack at the carousel, of all things. This is not me. This is like, how is this going? What's going on? So it's really something else. And anyway, to get into the book, the lead character, Holden Caulfield, a call is actually kind of a term. It provides second sight. So it's almost like an esoteric or occult meaning to it. And it ties into the notion of the catcher in the rye. So the field and the catcher in the rye. The theme of the book is that Holden Caulfield has these kind of ideations that he wants to save kids. There's a weird kid fixation, and that he's going to be the catcher in the rye, and that's what the title references. But it's actually kind of a miss. It shows kind of like the split brain schizophrenia of some of these killers is where he misinterprets a poem and calls it The Catcher in the Rye when it's different. It's a different kind of thing in the actual real poem. So he's very interesting, but he's not a positive personality. He has almost every psychological problem imaginable: suicidal, violent ideation. He's a pyromaniac. He's a sex addict, but he's a sex addict in his brain, but he doesn't complete it. So he's actually kind of an incel. And there's a famous kind of sequence within Catcher in the Rye where he rents a prostitute, but he can't complete the act. So he's like a frustrated, it's even worse than like an actual real, like kind of sexual person. Like he doesn't complete the act. So he's kind of a frustrated. And there's also like, yeah. So anyway, it's incredible. And there's a lot of names in here that refer to actual people. Like there's a thing, Al Pike, he mentions Albert Pike, if you remember Morals and Dogma. One of the characters is Pike. There's another character that references Henry Luce, who at that time was a very powerful figure in Time Life, back when magazines were worth something. But Luce went on to buy the Zapruder film, which is, we can get into other like Patsy's and Oswald, which more and more information on Oswald's coming out that he was handled. And one of these interesting things of these killers is they're handled too in strange ways. So anyway, this book, it's really just something else. So that's a brief overview of the book. He wears, I don't know if can you see this? Do we have the slides up?
You'd have to pull them up again. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Took them down for the intro.
All right. Sorry about that.
All good.
Get these up here.
There we go.
So these are the covers. It's a very distinctive cover, red and gold. I mentioned this cover. This is the cover with the carousel where it ends, where his kind of obsession, this kind of pedophile obsession with his sister, which is incest. I mean, it's really dark. And for the time, this was a very salacious book at the time. Now it's very tame with, the advent of so much stuff in our modern culture. Right. But this was like a lot of people, there were a lot of outrages about this book. But he's depicted, he wears this red hat, but he calls it a human hunting hat. That's the whole thing. So this red almost symbolizes blood. And he's dissociating. And there's a famous sequence in here where he talks about the ducks in Central Park and where do they go. And it shows that his mind frame isn't working because he doesn't understand that ducks fly south for the winter. So he thinks about that. But this is another copy of that. And then this is J.D. Salinger. He was in the war. He was very much involved in interrogating. So he was in a kind of the same kind of intel group that Henry Kissinger, of all people, was in. And it was very important after the war ended in 1945 for them to like paperclip people, but also interrogate to get like psychological. It was a psychological process. So he was very much knowledgeable about psychological processes and how to get the truth out of people. And that was actually kind of one of the pre-interest in MK Ultra, was this interrogation, because it went from World War II to the Korean War, which was 1950 to 1953. So the same kind of issues, because the North Koreans were interrogating pilots and things like that and bringing them back. And so there was all this issue or concern with mind control. And so then you have these two characters who were involved in two very public assassination. One was successful. The other one supposedly wasn't. It would have changed history if Reagan died, because George Bush Sr. would have been president.
Right.
They're all both making the same gesture, this kind of blank-eyed stare. This is Chapman and Hinckley, for people who don't know that. Hinckley got out of jail. And it kind of ties in, like Hinckley's still kind of this strange kind of figure. He plays music online. He's on X. And they're asking him, this is from TMZ, John Hinckley Jr. asked by X users to assassinate Donald Trump. And so Trump has had, I don't know how many assassinations, 3. It ties into this book, this theme of young girls, pedophilia, and Jodie Foster. So Hinckley had this fixation with Jodie Foster. And that's kind of one of the things that drove her on from Taxi Driver. And so you see this kind in this whole kind of discussion I'm talking about, this weird overlap between reality and fiction. So Catcher in the Rye is fictional, but these people, something morphs in their brain where fiction and reality get blurred. Something has happened to Hinckley and Chapman and some of these other, I don't know if you remember George Wallace, but he had a guy who tried to kill him in 1974. So it was 6 years earlier, who we're going to see is like influenced by Taxi Driver. So you see these overlaps, and you'll see this in the slides. And this character's name was kind of one of the infamous anti-heroes, kind of like Holden Caulfield, Travis Bickle. And Hinckley identifies with Travis Bickle. He's known to have watched this movie over and over. And so he's in the person of Travis Bickle, a very disturbed guy, but also like a catcher in the rye, trying to save young girls or young kids, right? At the very end of, there's a very brutal scene at the end of Taxi Driver, if you remember. And this changed her life, Jodie Foster's life, for the worse. Like, I don't know if she was ever the same. So anyway, so this is Hinckley on his way to shoot Reagan in early 80. He's like identifies, he says that this is highlighted. The young prostitute Iris from her pimp. Hinckley identified with Travis and began to act like him after he'd seen the film 15 times. So this is something kind of like a programming thing, where he was, in my opinion, programmed through that film. He bought the same clothes, ate the same foods, drank the same liquors, invented a girlfriend just as had Bickle. And then he bought these guns. There's a famous gun buying scene in Taxi Driver, if you remember that. I don't know how well people remember.
There's
or the audience.
There's a strange thing with repetition and mimicry throughout these themes, it seems.
Yeah, no, it is. It's something else. And you'll see that it's separate from this, like I mentioned Sirhan earlier. There were a lot of repetition of phrase. He had his own notebooks where he'd repeat, like, must kill RFK, must do this. All these things are like repetition. And it's repeated in the book Catcher in the Rye.
One comic book, one destination, one epic giveaway. This summer, the quest for the holy grail of comics arrives at Yamava Resort and Casino at San Manuel. Starting June 1st, Club Serrano members will have 5 ways to own a piece of history. And Action Comics #1, the comic book that saved the world, valued at over $400,000. Don't miss your chance to win on August 5th at Yamava Resort and Casino. Details at yamava.com. Must be 21 to enter. Please gamble responsibly.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
One of the lesser known kind of guys who did this, who's influenced by Catcher in the Rye, his name was Robert John Bardo. And he was obsessed with the book. And he somehow got this obsession with this beautiful young girl, Rebecca Schaefer, who was an actress, and traveled to LA and killed her in her front door. And it's just a very strange story how he got interested. But when he was seen fleeing, he was wearing a t-shirt, jeans, and sandals. A red paperback copy of Catcher in the Rye was found on the roof of the Beverly Palms Rehabilitation Center on Beverly Boulevard. Bardo indicated he threw a red-covered paperback book entitled The Catcher in the Rye in an alley while he was running. The discovery of the book harked back to the 1981 shooting of former Beatle John Lennon by one-time mental patient Mark David Chapman. After the obsessed fan shot the rock singer, he calmly took out a copy of the J.D. Salinger novel and was reading it when police arrived. There's much more to the story of Chapman in the book, because he carried it with him like a Bible, even into his, and we'll read this, even into his court case and his sentencing.
Wow.
One of the interesting things, I found something like a newspaper article where they're talking about Chapman and Hinckley in the same page. So these two kind of strange guys associated with Catcher in the Rye, and you'll see in the central thing there reads Catcher in Rye passage in court. And he had the defense. His dad was strange. His dad was friends with George Bush. See, the Bush family, really. They were oil people. And if people remember, it was one of George Bush's sons was at a dinner with John Hinckley Sr. when Hinckley Jr. tried to kill Reagan in D.C. at another hotel.
Oh, that's just coincidence. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. No, it's all covered up. Like you can barely find even a reference to it, but there's like weird, and like I said, the chief beneficiary would have been George H.W. Bush. So this is Robert Bardo. He had an assassin's kit. This is Bardo was not. He was determined to be not insane. When he killed the actress, he suffered from a schizophrenic disorder known as splitting, which hampered his ability to form intent for murder. And that splitting meant he alternated between seeing Schaefer as an all evil or all good, but was not aware of the shift. Like this guy's brain had literally been split. And it goes back to Easterbrook's and this whole creation of alters through traumatic experiences. So this guy somehow had his brain split. And some of these guys do, and certainly, in my opinion, Sirhan had something like that happen to him, which is very relevant because RFK's son is in HHS right now, right? Mm. Bardo's very strange too. The intent, the focus, why he was focused on Schaefer, but he had this paperback and just more of this weird Chapman and Schaefer and links. And then, of all things, this shows up before the assassination in 1980 in another movie about mind control, really. And there is the lead girl from what is it? The Shining, reading Catcher in the Rye with little split-brained kid, right? He talks to Red Rum. He has The Shining. And this is before these two assassinations that I mentioned, right? So it's before Lennon. So somehow, whether it's Kubrick or somebody on Kubrick's team or something, they had it in. At the very end of Catcher in the Rye, Phoebe is wearing a blue dress. So here is this girl whose name I can't remember, but she's wearing a blue dress too. So they got all the symbolism right.
If you look at Kubrick's work as a whole, it's not surprising to throw in some sort of symbolism like this that correlates with mind control.
Yeah, no, it gets worse. I mentioned Wallace and his killer, and he wrote a diary, and he was watching Kubrick's film and was identifying with Alex DeLarge from A Clockwork Orange. So you have Hinckley identifying with Travis Bickle, this other guy identifying with Alex DeLarge, and then Chapman identifying with Caulfield. So something about these fake characters has made it into their consciousness one way or another.
It's like a mental parasite that replicates.
I think so. And I think, in my opinion, somebody helped facilitate that is my guess. Another kind of paranoid, not that great of a movie, but one of the central things within the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson is Catcher in the Rye. It comes up over and over. He's obsessed with the book too. He has a copy of it, just like Chapman. And there's they kind of put some little things in there which are pretty interesting. Another guy who's done research on this is Joe Atwill. Yeah. He's covered the pedophilia and Freemason stuff, Catcher in the Rye. I mean, there's one sequence within Catcher in the Rye where, for some odd reason, Holden Caulfield is in Central Park. He decides to go to the Museum of Modern History and go downstairs into an Egyptian display and hang out and see all this Egyptian stuff, which is like very central to the kind of Masonic mythos as Egypt and things like that.
Yeah.
There's this repeated phrase we talked about and you mentioned. He repeats in this. This is a people shooting hat. I said, I shoot people in this hat. So this weird red hat and the violence of this young 16-year-old kid is through this. And he's also a chain smoker too, which is another bad habit. He just smokes a cigarette, puts a new one down. Some of the stuff that I'm going to cover are in two really good books. Mind Games, The Assassination of John Lennon by David Whelan, and The Murder of John Lennon by Fenton Bresler. And these are people who both keyed into this whole Catcher in the Rye thing. But a lot of that stuff is kind of, but dust is built up over it. I don't think a lot of people are talking it. But they got that Chapman, something was up with Chapman, this guy Fenton Bresler. And this is a comment. When you read in detail about how Mark Chapman behaved after Lennon's murder, you will find a striking parallel between the dazed as if in a trance-like condition. Trances are mentioned in Catcher in the Rye too. It's actually within like the first couple pages he actually mentions he's in a trance, which is really weird. So this weird word usage is also very odd. Trance-like condition of the two men. Mark remembered more of the actual killing, but otherwise their reactions were also identical. He's comparing him to Sirhan. And remember what ex-lieutenant and detective Arthur O'Connor has said, quote, I saw him the night of the murder. I studied him intensely. He looks as if he could have been programmed, and I know what use you are going to make of the word, unquote.
Wow.
They both had the same psychiatrist, Sirhan and Chapman. This is mentioned in here. This is a very creepy guy, Bernard Diamond. This isn't a footnote. This should be like the beginning of a chapter, but he says a chapter. But now, like, if you know all the CIA doctors that are around so many of these events, you know that this is a very important point. But this is why these researchers are very important, because they leave little crumbs or kernels for people like me. Quote, there's an odd footnote to all this. The principal medical defense witness for Sirhan was Dr. Bernard Diamond of the University of California, one of America's leading psychiatrists who used hypnosis in his work. 13 years later, he was to be one of the defense psychiatrists in Mark's case. His diagnosis for the two men was the same, paranoid schizophrenia. Yet he seems not to have used hypnosis in either of his two interviews with Mark, although he hypnotized Sirhan on 6 of his 8 visits to great effect. For instance, when Dr. Diamond asked Sirhan where he had concealed his gun while waiting for Kennedy, Sirhan, in his trance, went for the inside of his belt on the left side, and the police at last knew where he had carried the weapon. So Sirhan had these post-hypnotic suggestions of action, something would happen. I don't even think Sirhan killed Kennedy, by the way. He was just a patsy. The guy behind him was a guy by the name of Thane Eugene Caesar, and a very suspicious guy, but the death shot of Kennedy came very close to the back of his head, which nobody saw Sirhan. Sirhan, very minute guy, actually. He wasn't I don't think he was very close to like 5'2", 5 feet.
Yeah.
And he wasn't close
back to some of these assassinations in our recent history. I'd say between late 50s and early 90s was the prime era for these programmed killers, and it seemed like there's just certain individuals, if you look at a bigger picture, that were singled out, experimented on for the purpose, seemingly, to see how far they could go with controlling a person's mind.
I think you're right. I think they pulled it off. To certain things. These guys all have weird handlers too, like people around them who just very suspicious behavior. But I think that they were able to experiment with this stuff and through a use of everything. I think it's just hypnosis plus drugs plus a skill. I think they developed a technique. And some of these guys who are like their defense psychiatrists are really their handlers, right? So it's like a cover that it's like, oh, we're just going to hire this guy. He's going to show up. Like
this leads to a whole separate thing, but I think they've now implemented it through technology and social media to where they don't really have to do this hands-on programming and mind control. They could just do it remotely through drugs and algorithms.
I think you're right. If you look at the guy who drove, I can't remember his name, but he drove to Buffalo to do that racist attack.
Yeah.
He had a strange handler online from the FBI. And it just was weird. Like, why are you driving to Buffalo? Like, he drove so far. And you'll see this weird movement of these guys. Why is Chapman going from Hawaii to New York City over and over again? Like, he was kept flying to New York City for odd reasons. Why does Mangione go from Oahu to New York City? Why does Ruth, who was the kind of guy who was seen in Ukraine, flying around with, he can't pay his alimony or whatever, but he flies to like Ukraine and then he goes to Florida to supposedly kill the president, right? Wow. So these are really strange. There's just a lot of high strangeness here, a lot of things that need to be explained. Repetitive phrases, we mentioned that over and over. Here it is. Diamond is asking Sirhan, is this crazy writing? Yes, Sirhan wrote. Are you crazy? No. Well, why are you writing crazy? Practice. Practice for what? Mind control was what Sirhan written. So this repetition stuff. The Catcher in the Rye, Chapman's carrying it around. One of the things about this, like I talked about these guys identifying with certain characters, people think, like, according to Fenton Bresler, people think that Chapman always identified with Holden Caulfield. That's not the case. According to Fenton Bresler, this is what he writes. The second popular misconception about Mark relates to J.D. Salinger's famous novel, The Catcher in the Rye. The theory is that he always identified himself with Holden Caulfield, the book's phony-hating 16-year-old hero, ever since he first read Catcher at the same age. After all, this is the book that the amazed New York policeman found him quietly reading outside the Dakota, with the inscription he had written in the inscription, to Holden Caulfield from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement. In his prison cell awaiting trial, he maintained, the reason I killed John Lennon was to gain prominence, to promote the reading of J.D. Salinger's A Catcher in the Rye. So that's his motive, is to be a evangelist for this book. Like, how does this happen? Like, that's his thing. They're not to, like, because he hated Lennon. There's no, like, evidence of, like, long-term hatred of Lennon either. I'm not saying I'm a messiah or anything like that. If you read the book, if you understand my past, you will see I am indeed the Catcher in the Rye of this generation. Really weird. So, there was no references to this. And it's just like, this is something that just popped up, that his interest in Catcher in the Rye. Some of these pictures too that they took of him after the shooting are incredible. He's catching it, he's reading it, he brings it into court. It's just the most bizarre thing that he's so fixated on this book. Here it is. It was clearly a difficult time for him, and now an ominous new factor came into his life. He became interested in The Catcher in the Rye. We do not know why. We do not know if anyone suggested it to him, and if so, who. Catcher is a book that most people read once in their lifetime in their teens, and that is it. Why on earth, seemingly out of the blue, did Mark suddenly get so involved in a book like most of his generation of young Americans he had already read before at school nearly 10 years earlier? Like, so this is like a strange thing. And then the countdown to, he literally goes into a bookstore and buys The Catcher in the Rye the day of the murder. So, like, that's part of his thing, is to get the book. He identifies with this word "fu" in the book. He also has this very kind of, the Reverend Charles McGowan is a really interesting figure in the John Lennon assassination, because he was a very far right kind of Christian guy. And why is he involved in this? He also had a military intel background, of all things. So there's all kinds.
Now, what was his involvement?
Charles McGowan was this guy who was around Chapman for a long period of time, almost like a handler. But he wasn't some kind of just a mere reverend. It's like a side thing to this, but like, he had a military intel background, and he was very well networked in the right wing view. And if you remember, Lennon was seen as I think properly, as a left wing figure. Yeah. Anti-war, anti-Vietnam, and counterculture too, right? So I think that he really ruffled a lot of feathers. He was seen as a pro-drug, not really an American, right? It's from the UK.
Yeah.
I think there were real issues with him getting his citizenship, if I remember correctly. So he was not seen as kind of a positive person, right, by the right wing types in the United States. So he had suddenly become involved again August 1980 with The Catcher in the Rye. He equally suddenly and mysteriously thereafter recovered interest in Lennon, whom, as with Holden Caulfield, he had not thought about for nearly the past 10 years. So he somehow gets involved in Lennon and Catcher in the Rye. Mark was clearly going through torment. He told his perplexed wife that he was thinking of changing his name to Holden Caulfield. On September 10th, he actually wrote to a school teacher friend named Linda Irish, who had moved from Honolulu to New Mexico. "I'm going nuts." He drew a picture of Diamond Head Mountain with the sun, the moon, and stars above it, and signed the letter, "The Catcher in the Rye, Mark."
Wow.
So, like, and he worked at a psych hospital. Like, he was a mental patient, but also as an employee. At least that's what they said. Yeah.
Lots of connections with psych wards and mental hospitals as well.
Sure are. Absolutely. And weird hospital stays. You'll see kind of strange hospital stage. Like Mangione is like Hinckley in the sense that there was a definite personality change when Mangione went into the hospital for his back surgery. They say he came out kind of a different person. Wow. And the same thing happened to Sirhan Sirhan. There was a mysterious 2-week disappearance of Sirhan Sirhan, and nobody knows where he was. And so there are weird overlaps between this. And then you have Chapman in and out of a hospital all the time. Like, what is he doing?
And people wonder why I don't like going to the hospital and doctors.
Be careful. This is the day of the killing. As he walked 20 blocks up to the Dakota on West 72nd Street, incongruous and amid the lightly dressed New Yorkers with his heavy winter gear, he realized he was missing a prop. He had with him his double fantasy album, but something was missing. He halted his progress toward Lennon's selected place of execution and dived into a bookshop to emerge with a red paperback copy of The Catcher in the Rye. On the title page, he wrote, "To Holden Caulfield from Holden Caulfield." And below that, this is my statement. So the book is his statement. Wow. Of all things. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. He sat down and read the book. And he talks about getting the book. And then in court, February 1st, he actually writes to New York Times. I think the killing of Lennon happened in December of 1979. And then the shooting of Reagan was March 1980, something like that. But on Sunday 1st, the 1st of February, Mark sat down and wrote to the New York Times in ballpoint capitals a statement, which the newspaper printed 8 days later. Seldom could a book that first appeared in paperback 17 years earlier had such a glowing sales boost. Quote, this is from Chapman. "It is my sincere belief that presenting this written statement will not only stimulate the reading of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, but will also help many to understand what has happened. If you are able to view the actual copy of The Catcher in the Rye that was taken from me on the night of December 8th, you could find it in it the written words, 'This is my statement.' Unfortunately, I was unable to continue this dance, and have since spoken openly with the police, doctors, and others involved in this case. I now fully realize that this should not have been done, for it removed the emphasis that I wanted to place on the book. My wish is for all of you to someday read The Catcher in the Rye. All my efforts will now be devoted toward that goal. For this extraordinary book holds many answers. My true hope is that in wanting to find these answers, you will read The Catcher in the Rye. Thank you, Mark David Chapman, The Catcher in the Rye."
Insane.
He totally shaved his head, too, which is another sign. Some of these guys, when you see some of these hypno-programmed killers, they like to shave their head, whether it's like Manson, the Manson family. There were a couple guys in California who did that. Mullins was his name. Like
Britney Spears.
A lot of LSD, too. And that's one of the other common factors of a lot of these guys. Like Chapman did apparently a lot of LSD.
Interesting.
And a lot of these other people that seem to have taken an overwhelming amount of this kind of drug, which, pretty sus.
There's so much overlap between the MK Ultra program, the hippie counterculture movement, and these assassinations and serial killers and murders that were all kind of conveniently occurring at the same time.
Yeah, there was a spike. There was literally a spike known in serial killings and stuff that happened from the late 60s to the early 80s. And I've talked to a guy, Voronsky was his name, he wrote a book about it, and he's still mystified as to why. But it seems to be an overlap between massive drugs, Operation Phoenix. A lot of these guys were in the military. Almost a lot, like Dave McGowan points it out, a lot of these guys did military service and got whacked. Heidnik or people who were close to Vietnam, they just created this. With a lot of the drugs in Vietnam, too, and testing and all this, it just created these very murderous, crazy people. This is for his court trial. So this is all within a year. On Monday, 24th August 1981, Mark David Chapman, in his hair close crop from the incident when he had totally shaved his head, walked into Justice Edwards' court under his usually heavy armed guard. He carried with him a copy of The Catcher in the Rye. He wore dark slacks and a light blue shirt with no jacket, and he wore a bulletproof vest. And then that's what he quoted to the court. He quoted The Catcher in the Rye. He says, what about Mark himself? He had spent several hours listening to other people talking about him. What did he have to say in his own defense? Asked if he had anything to say to the court before sentence was pronounced, he pled guilty, much like Sirhan Sirhan, which is interesting. It's another commonality, is why these guys don't go to trial. Because in trial, there would be a lot of evidence, and a lot of evidence presented by both sides. But if you prove guilty, it just goes straight to sentencing, right? So why did Chapman? Oh yeah, I could spend hours talking about this because it ties into really crazy stuff like another book, which is The Manchurian Candidate, Condon, and then some of there were a lot of, like, Jolly and West was one of many. Diamond was another of them. There were a lot of these guys, and they're still around, that know this specified technique. And I think they've perfected it. Just like you said, Gendron was the kid's name. Now it came to my mind. I think Gendron was the guy who went to Buffalo, and it was like impelled all through tech. He didn't like have any personal connections. Asked if he had anything to say to the court before sentence was pronounced, Mark opened his copy of The Catcher in the Rye and read an extract to the hushed part 49. He had worked it out carefully. If you want to check it for yourself, it's found on page 173 of the Bantam paperback. Holden Caulfield is talking to his young sister Phoebe, right? This weird kind of pedophile theme. The only person in the world whom he really loves, and you have to kind of read the book, it's not good, about what he wants to be when he grows up. She suggests a lawyer like their father, but Holden dismisses lawyers as phonies. What he wants to be is a catcher in the rye, and he explains what he means in this passage, cited by Mark David Chapman on his Day of Judgment. Quote, anyway, I keep picturing all these kids playing some game in this big field of rye, and all thousands of little kids, and nobody is around, nobody big, I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some craggy cliff. And what I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, they are running and they don't look where they are going. I have to come out from nowhere, somewhere, and catch them. That's all I do all day. I'd just be the catcher in the rye. So that's his defense, as a catcher. And if you read the book, there are weird overlaps in the use of the word catch, because it's the title of the book. It's this kind of positive kind of thing, like he wants to save the kids. Yeah. But also in this kind of the very important ending where he sees the words F-U, F-U-C-K-Y-O-U, he wants to catch that person who wrote that and bang their brains out and like literally eviscerate their brains. That's the segment. Like, it's super graphic violence. Yeah. And what it does in the mind is it takes the same concept of the catch and it makes it positive and then super violent at the same time. So the word has an interpretation that can be taken in different contexts, one very negatively. And some people say that that's the trigger word in the text of Catcher in the Rye is FU, because that's what makes Holden go off the rails. And there's like a subtext here, like some people even think, because the book is 26 chapters and it ends in the Central Park at the carousel with his sister, and the next chapter he's clearly in a mental institution talking about what happened, but his sister is nowhere to be found. So something may have happened. Like you can deduce that something happened to his sister, possibly super dark, right?
Yeah.
Because she's not there. He's talking to his brother, who he mentions his brother a lot in this thing. Now we switch to Hinckley, right? So Hinckley, we've done Chapman. This is from a book called Rawhide Down. That was the code word for Reagan, was rawhide. And it's writing. This is another strange movement. This guy's moving around. 4-day trip was a blur. A fast food and brief stops. Vegas, Cheyenne, Chicago, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Traveling through Utah, Hinckley awoke from a brief nap to find the bus hurtling through a massive snowstorm. He spent much of the trip slouched in a window seat, watching the scenery stream by or reading The Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger's novel of teenage angst and alienation. He identified with the story's main character, Holden Caulfield, but the book was also special to him because he knew that John Lennon's assassin had pulled it from his pocket and leafed through it moments after gunning down the rock and roll icon. Lennon, who had been killed 3.5 months earlier, was Hinckley's favorite musician. Even so, he sometimes felt he identified more with Lincoln's killer than Lennon himself. And so then it goes on. Now it was Monday morning. He barely had enough energy to get out of bed. He plaid stacked neatly on his hotel's fold-out stand, was stuffed with an army field jacket, black sports coat, Best Western Road Atlas, 2 pairs of underwear, and some shirts, pants, and jeans. The suitcase also held some of his poems and short stories, as well as several of his favorite books. In addition to The Catcher in the Rye, Hinckley had brought along a copy of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet and a book called Strawberry Fields Forever, John Lennon Remembered. So he has this book. He also has, like, there's tie-ins with Romeo and Juliet, super violent. And strangely, Strawberry Fields. There's like literally a strawberry field in Central Park, of all places. But yeah, so the overlaps. Here's like 2 very nefarious characters promoting this book. This is George W. Bush, interviewed in 1995. Question is, what was there a book that inspired you? There was this marvelous book by Salinger called Catcher in the Rye. So like this guy's like an architect of 9/11 and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then here's like Mr. Depop himself, Bill Gates. This is from 2013, best books I read. You may notice there aren't any novels on my list this year. It's not that I don't enjoy fiction. I've read The Catcher in the Rye a bunch of times. It's one of my favorite books ever. And so this is Ruth Crooks.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in The Good Girl, and we'll kind of get this. There's also Jared Leto portrayed Chapman in a movie called Chapter 27. Like I mentioned, there were 26 chapters in the book, so this film is meant to be this 27th chapter. And in that is another kind of, he had this kind of almost like an alter Chapman did, and he also was influenced by Wizard of Oz. And these kind of mind control, there's a common theme, including Catcher in the Rye, but also the use of Wizard of Oz imagery. And I forgot what the other book is, but like a lot of these guys have these strange obsessions with these fictional novels.
Oh, I'm going to have to check out that film. I've never seen that.
Which one? The Wizard of Oz?
No.
Oh,
Jared
27.
Leto film, Chapter
Yeah,
27.
it's interesting. I mean, and he's directly quoting from the book, too. So, like, you'll see on the intro, he has these kind of narratives or soliloquies or whatever where he's quoting from the book. This is kind of the symbolism of the call. I think I mentioned it earlier. It's a sign of psychic abilities in folklore. The call was believed to bestow a second sight or the ability to see into the future. And this is J.D. Silver talking about Ruth, that I think he's from like, this is the other one this is from Surge about Mangione. The NYPD claims to have found the CEO's shooter's backpack near the carousel in Central Park, exactly where The Catcher in the Rye ends. The chapter where he meets Lutz, it's a stand-in for Henry Lutz. I mentioned that earlier.
Wow.
And then Arthur Bremer's the guy's name who shot Wallace, whose inspiration was Taxi Driver, like Hinckley. So you see these weird overlaps. And some of the language was very scandalous for its time. They had terms for homosexuals, sex, phonies, deceiving. So it was like early 50s speech.
Yeah.
And then I kind of tied this to the cultural Cold War, things that were happening right around the end of the World War II that Salinger was involved in. And he may have been kind of like a promoted CIA kind of guy. He's mentioned here in this book, The Cultural Cold War, that he was helped along by somebody who's a CIA asset. I mean, it basically says that. Spender to open literary pages to a new generation of American writers like Saul Bellow, J.D. Salinger, Truman Capote, and Shirley Ann Grau. This is Arthur Bremer, and he was partially based, like he was influenced by Bickle. And we'll get to that. This is Wallace Dead on the Ground. This is from Arthur Bremer's so-called diary. There's a dispute as to whether it's real or not, but he wrote in his diary May of 4. This is like a week or two before he took a shot at Wallace, who got paralyzed. Milwaukee, saw Clockwork Orange, and thought about getting Wallace all through the picture. Fantasizing myself as the Alec, right? Alex DeLarge is the main character. But without my brothers, just a little of the old ultraviolence. I've decided Wallace would have the honor of, what would you call it? So he's like, Wallace dead, who cares?
Wow.
So these guys are watching these films.
Yeah.
Bremer's diary was primary inspiration. So then, just crazy. Oh no, he's watching Clockwork Orange. Then that inspires Taxi Driver in 76. This is 74. So you see this kind of like fake thing influencing reality.
Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I wonder how many of these original authors and creators of these stories are unwillingly assets of the CIA, and their information is just being used in a certain way. And I wonder if they actually know that they're part of some of these operations. It's very interesting.
I agree. I don't know. I don't know if they know. I don't know. I mean, it goes all the way today. Mangione is the healthcare killer or whatever. And he was influenced by Kaczynski, right? So Kaczynski was a real victim of MK Ultra. Like if you look into what happened to Kaczynski, he was basically mentally tortured for 3 years through multiple behavior modification things. I think it was the late 50s, early 60s, if I remember, get my dates right. But like it changed him.
Something like he was separated from all human contact for a very long period of time, for many, for several times, something like that.
Yeah, it was something weird. Like they belittled him and told him he was inferior and not up to the work. And they did it over and over and over again. Like they did it for hours. Like they subjected him to hours and hours of psychological torment. And without his consent, like it was like he didn't know. He thought he was in some other study, but it was really an unethical thing. There's a book on it. I have the title of the book here. One of the interesting things is Mangione, we know he was influenced by Kaczynski because he wrote a review of Industrial Society and Its Future, which Kaczynski wrote. And he said he had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere. And at the end of the day, he's probably right. And Mangione has become kind of a folk hero in certain circles. Yeah. There's no question about it. Like for killing, because so many people have had almost everybody has a terrible story about their so-called healthcare provider, actually, or health insurance. So to those people who've gotten shafted, like literally shafted by their insurance company, like Mangione's a hero. Right. He was not a United Healthcare customer, so like, why is he going after the CEO? He writes all these interesting things. And this is a guy who really underwent personality change. He went to the best school, private school, valedictorian, Palo Alto, worked on AI, and then all of a sudden he disappears for 3 months, rises up and kills a healthcare CEO. Like the guy was charmed. He had his life set out for him. He's a good-looking guy. Girls liked him. Yeah. This is the guy who screwed with Kaczynski's brain. His name was Henry Murray. We know a lot about him because he was involved in doing a psychological profile on Hitler, and it became the mind of Adolf Hitler. But he was the Langer report. But they compiled about 1,200 pages on Hitler, and this is kind of, I asked AI about what they did to Kaczynski, and it's like, controversial work began in 1959 with a study on stress responses involving 22 Harvard undergraduates, including Kaczynski. This experiment, conducted over 3 years, aimed to understand how individuals withstand psychological pressure, a topic perhaps informed by Murray's wartime experience. The study, dubbed Multiform Assessments of Personality Development, was deceptively framed to participants as a benign exploration of beliefs. Kaczynski, a brilliant but socially awkward sophomore when he joined in 1959, was one of the subjects. Participants were asked to write essays detailing their personal philosophies and values. These essays were then used against them in a series of grueling interrogations. Sessions, subjects faced a hostile interlocutor who mocked and dismantled their beliefs. Encounters were filmed. Participants were later forced to watch their own humiliation. Electrodes, like, wow, this is really intense. Electrodes monitored physiological responses, heart rate, sweat, adding a clinical layer to the psychological assault. Murray's goal was to observe how young men, presumably still forming their identities, cope with extreme stress and confrontation. Kaczynski, who assigned the code name Lawful, the experience was particularly intense. Over 3 years, he endured roughly 200 hours of these sessions. So imagine that session of Alex DeLarge in A Clockwork Orange, where he has the electrodes on his head and like his eyes are wide open watching films. That's something like that Kaczynski went through.
Wow.
Like it's almost like a mad scientist type stuff. Like it's not a joke. Like imagine somebody electrodes and somebody belittling him.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. That's how bad. So a lot of people like, oh, Kaczynski's messed up. He was a freaking lab rat for these psychos, these nut jobs, man. Like in the worst way possible. So he had a right, in my opinion, to be upset. This is the book about it. Harvard and the Unabomber, the education of American terrorism. And then this is kind of Luigi becomes this folk hero. He's literally on the side of a building in New York City.
Oh, wow.
As a saint. This is like a depiction of a saint. Isn't that crazy?
That is fascinating.
So you see these overlaps between these guys. I have another one. Let me see if I can pull up this other one.
Yeah.
I have another.
It's so strange to see how these situations and these individuals involved with high-impact events have evolved over the years, and the circumstances that created them seem to have, like we were talking about earlier, been implemented into different ways of control, like technology and drugs and things like that.
Yeah, no, they've been testing for a long time, and the Murray tests on Kaczynski are an example. Who else was at Harvard at that time? Timothy Leary, right? So at the time that Murray was conducting stuff on Kaczynski, Leary was like doing mushroom experiments. He was talking to Huxley, and then became kind of the Johnny Appleseed of LSD. Like became strangely, and then credited the CIA with creating the counterculture. Like he literally knew he was a part of that. Like he didn't deny it. I don't know if you want to go through some of these other things, but it just shows about Salinger's kind of psychological sophistication through interrogation techniques. One of the interesting things about Salinger is he never duplicated the success or the public popularity of Catcher in the Rye. He wrote other documents, but they weren't unless you're a Salinger kind of aficionado, he didn't really have any other successes. So there's a lot of questions as to why that is. One of the interesting figures in our public kind of thing is Winona Ryder, who's read Catcher in the Rye 1,200 times.
Whoa.
Like, wow. Yeah, so keep away from her, man.
She's got crazy eyes, man.
Hell yeah, she does. She said, me and Holden are like this team, so she totally identifies with this guy. She's the granddaughter of Timothy Leary, who I just mentioned. So, like, this is why is she promoting this as well. Timothy Leary was her godfather.
Wow.
Because her real name is Horowitz, and her dad was Timothy Leary's archivist. So her dad compiled all the paper, and you can see it online. The Timothy Leary archives were online when I was researching him. Crazy stuff. This is her wearing a shirt that is somebody who knows Catcher in the Rye would know this because Holden goes to Penn State Prep. It doesn't exist. So like the school for boys, like if you knew Catcher in the Rye, you'd know what this shirt means. Wow. Otherwise, you would think it would be real. It's not. She just talks about her Catcher in the Rye here. Goddamn movies, they can ruin you. I'm not kidding. That was from one of Holden Caulfield's statement. Her interest goes all in all, she talks about FU and all this stuff. Like she got busted for stealing, her biography. The weird thing about these Trump assassins, they both were featured in a BlackRock commercial at the same time.
I saw that. That is crazy.
Crazy. So like what's BlackRock doing?
Right.
What are they associated with? Ruth, this is Ruth in the Ukraine, and then he shows up in Florida trying to kill Trump. I mean, they talk about the insane, Rogan and Musk talked about the insane details around Crooks, about his home was scrubbed, no footprint on the internet. He was in a BlackRock commercial.
It makes you want to question every high-impact event, assassination, anything that comes across our mainstream media as an emotionally impactful situation, you have to question all of these things now.
For sure. And here's Ruth this, and then, you know, he looks kind of like an kind of Mangione, like up and coming. He's dressed well here. Some police organizers, he call him a super citizen. The next thing, he's trying to kill the president.
Wow.
According to Shadow of Ezra, Wesley Ruth visited Fort Bragg, a major military base, 147 times. Like, what's he doing at Fort Bragg? Fort Bragg is a very dark place, by the way.
Yeah.
Also in Ukraine, he has this weird X symbolism.
I wonder if they're finding people that are more susceptible to suggestion, hypnotic suggestion, to mind control, and grooming these people for a period of time to commit these acts just to see if they could get them to do it.
There is something called the Stanford Hypnosis scale, and they actually can put people on this scale to see how susceptible they are to suggestibility. And they say that younger people are we're just more suggestible when we're young. We're taking in information, we're trusting our elders, our teachers, our doctors. When we get older, we're like super critical and cynical, you know, because we've seen so much, which is interesting because all these assassins, a lot of them are very young. Oswald was 24, Sirhan was 24, Chapman was 24, 25.
I'm grateful I always had that rebellious streak and questioned everything from a very young age. I don't think I was ever that susceptible to those suggestions, but who knows?
Yeah, no, you probably weren't. I mean, they've tested Sirhan. They said that he could go into a hypnotic state like with a snap of a finger.
Wow.
And he had undergone a lot of trauma. He was a Palestinian who, like, during those wars in Israel were really brutal. Like, they were slaughtered. I mean, it was a demographic slaughter. And so his family, like, lived in a church for a year without their house. And the wells were poisoned. Like, they would literally cut up a body and shove it into local wells so people would have to see it. Like, it was a terror. Like, what's going on in Gaza is just continuation of some of the stuff Sirhan went through. So Ruth has this very strange, this is like, we talked about Bernard Diamond at the beginning. Ruth had this very strange person, Dr. Sue Kim, who's kind of like a private public person with the CIA agency, but also worked for the Rand Corporation. But he had her contact information. Like, what's this rando dude doing with this kind of sophisticated doctorate type person with deep state connections, you know? How does he lie in wait for 12 hours? Tens of thousands of messages between Ruth and Dr. Sue Kim. And she's online. Ex-CIA, supposedly. Yale, Rand. These are all indicators.
Are you ever ex-CIA?
I don't think so. And it leads up to other assassins, not just Ruth, but this guy Livelsberger, and then the guy who drove down the street in New Orleans, right?
New Orleans, yeah.
Yeah, Shamsuddin Bauhar Jabbar. A lot of Fort Bragg connections. Like, what are these? Livelsberger was very strange. This is the guy who took his Tesla truck to Las Vegas and supposedly blew it up in front of the Trump Tower, if you remember that. Yeah. That was right at the beginning of this year. Those two assaults, I think, were on January 1st, 2025. Really not that long ago, like 6 months ago. Bourbon Street, that's the road that he went down in New Orleans. Like, that's the main street of New Orleans for people who don't know, or the main tourist street, I should say. You probably know. I know you're from that. Ruth with a famous chef, Jose Andres. Like, what's he doing with Jose Andres? Livelsberger, same day, both associated with Fort Bragg. Livelsberger, no indication that he would do something like this. There's the other thing, yeah. He was building drones or something like that. And somebody analyzed him and said, hey, this is a bunch of baloney. Sopranos, Tony's is obsessed with ducks, much like Holden Caulfield. So you see this literary reference. Let's see.
Some of this stuff has such weird synchronicities and connections that it seems almost impossible for humans or these groups to be knowingly piecing these things together. It seems too intricate. It seems to fit too well together in a synchronistic manner to be planned and plotted by humans, but it's happening, and it's very strange.
It's very strange. It's actually been featured on South Park. Maybe I can get this to play. It's kind of a fun clip.
There you go.
Okay, kids, let's take our seats. There has been a change in school policy, and so I'm assigning you all a book to read.
A book? God, I hate those.
Now, kids, this book is very controversial and has just been taken off the banned books list.
Oh, really? Sweet.
It's called Catcher in the Rye, and it has some very risque parts.
All right.
And strong, vulgar language.
Awesome, cool.
And in fact, many schools across the country still ban this book because it's thought to be so inappropriate.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
Tonight I want you to read chapters 1 through 5, and tomorrow we'll discuss the...
No, come on, let's read it now. Mr. Garrison, didn't the guy who shot John Lennon say it was because of this book?
Yes, apparently John Lennon's killer said he was inspired by Catcher in the Rye, but he was just a kook.
Whoa, you're telling us this book is filthy, inappropriate, and made a guy shoot the king of hippies? Can we please read this right now?
You will read it at home, and you will all be mature about its adult themes and language.
That's great.
Kill John Lennon! Kill John Lennon! Kill John Lennon! Kill John Lennon! Hey, Dad, where does John Lennon live?
John Lennon's dead, Butters.
Ah, dang it.
Let's do, this is one from, I mentioned conspiracy theory earlier, so this is kind of like their reference to this book. He's in a bookstore, Mel Gibson.
You receipt?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Catch in the Rye.
Yeah,
It's a classic.
Yeah.
Have you ever read it?
Yeah, I've never read it.
Never?
No, I haven't. I've never read it.
Catch.
I never.
And scary paranoid music. But I mean, it's really, it's just an incredible thing that's kind of gone through the modern culture, and also this assassination thing. Like, it really is there. Like, it's really incredible.
Well, you've done some great research in compiling this stuff, and we'll definitely have to revisit this. I'm sure there's much more that we can cover. We had a limited time today, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing this. Before we close out, remind the audience where they can find you.
Yeah, William Ramsey Investigates is my podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, and then also my books are all available on Amazon. I've got 5 books, and then my documentaries are on Patreon because the Amazon won't let me upload them, so I gave up on that. But you can find them on a lot of different subjects: smiley face killers, Aleister Crowley, occult Hollywood. So I try to do a lot of different research.
Excellent. William, thank you again. We'll definitely be doing this again in the future. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow.